The diaper bag slipped from my shoulder for the third time as I fumbled with my apartment keys. Luca whimpered against my chest, his tiny fist gripping my olive green blouse like it was the only solid thing in his world. Maybe it was. Inside, the air hung stale and cold. I'd forgotten to adjust the thermostat before leaving for work this morning. Another thing on the endless list of tasks I couldn't quite manage to complete. Single motherhood was a relentless tide, and I was drowning one unwashed dish at a time. I set Luca down in his playpen, watching him immediately reach for the plastic rings that hung from the padded edge. 7 months old now, almost 8. He'd started trying to pull himself up last week, determined little thing. His dark hair stuck up in wild tufts, and when he looked at me with those deep brown eyes, I saw him. Giovanni. Every single time. 15 months since the divorce. 15 months since I'd walked away from the marble floors and crystal chandeliers and the suffocating silence of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like dying slowly from the inside. My phone buzzed. Jessica, probably. She'd been texting all afternoon, worried because I'd mentioned Luca seemed fussier than usual. I ignored it, heading to the kitchen to warm up the bottle I'd prepared that morning. The microwave hummed, filling the quiet apartment with something that almost sounded like companionship. Boston had seemed like the right choice back then, far enough from New York that I wouldn't accidentally run into Giovanni at some restaurant or gala, close enough to civilization that I could still build a career. I'd found work at a mid-sized corporate law firm, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. The rent was due next week. I tried not to think about the number in my checking account, the way it seemed to shrink faster than I could replenish it. Daycare alone cost more than my first apartment out of law school. Luca started crying, that sharp wail that meant he was genuinely upset, not just fussy. I grabbed the bottle and returned to him, lifting his warm weight into my arms. He latched onto the bottle immediately, but his forehead felt hot against my chin. Too hot. I pressed my lips to his temple, the way my mother used to check my temperature when I was young, before the accident. Before I became an orphan at 24 and had to figure out how to be an adult without a safety net. Luca was burning up. "It's okay, baby," I murmured, carrying him to the bathroom. "Just a little fever. We'll get you some medicine." But even as I said it, dread coiled in my stomach. I'd given him infant acetaminophen 2 hours ago. It should have brought the fever down by now. The thermometer beeped. 103.2 degrees Fahrenheit. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, Googling symptoms with one hand while cradling Luca with the other. Every result seemed worse than the last. Meningitis, sepsis, brain damage from prolonged high fever. I called the pediatrician's office. Voicemail. Of course. It was past 6 on a Friday evening. Jessica's name appeared on my screen again. I answered this time. "Lauren, I've been trying to reach you. Is everything okay? Luca has a fever. 103.2. I don't know what to do." My voice cracked, betraying the panic I'd been trying to suppress. "Take him to the ER. Now. Don't wait." She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of the hospital bills, the copays I couldn't afford, the questions they might ask about his father, about why I was doing this alone, it all pressed down on me like a physical weight. "Lauren, are you listening? Take him now." "Yeah, okay, I'm going." I grabbed the diaper bag again, shoved in extra clothes for Luca, his favorite stuffed rabbit with one ear that he'd chewed until it was gray and damp. My wallet, insurance card, keys. The elevator in my building was broken again. I took the stairs, counting each one, focusing on the physical effort to keep the fear at bay. 4 flights. Luca's cries had quieted to a weak whimper that scared me more than the wailing. Outside, Boston's October night had turned vicious. The temperature had dropped since I'd come home, and the sky opened up just as I reached my car. Heavy, cold rain that soaked through my blouse in seconds. I strapped Luca into his car seat with trembling fingers, checking twice that it was secure. His eyes were half closed now, his little body limp. That wasn't right. He should be fighting, crying, doing something other than this terrible stillness. "Stay with me, Luca. Please stay with me." The hospital was 12 minutes away. I made it in 8, running 2 red lights and not caring about the consequences. Let them give me tickets. Let them arrest me. None of it mattered if Luca wasn't okay. The emergency room entrance glowed harsh and bright against the stormy darkness. I ran through the automatic doors, rain still streaming down my face, mixing with tears I hadn't realized I was crying. I need help. My son, he has a high fever, and he's not responding normally. The triage nurse took one look at Luca and called for immediate assistance. Suddenly we were surrounded by people in scrubs, asking questions I could barely process. Age, weight, medical history, allergies. Is the father present? Someone asked. I froze. The question I'd been avoiding for 15 months, the lie I'd been living, it all came crashing down in that sterile hospital corridor. No, it's just me. They whisked Luca away through double doors I wasn't allowed to pass. A kind-faced woman in purple scrubs guided me to a small room with harsh lighting and plastic chairs that had been sat in by too many desperate people before me. Someone will be with you shortly to get more information. Try to stay calm. Stay calm. As if that was possible when my entire world was 7 months old and burning up somewhere beyond those impenetrable doors. I collapsed into one of the chairs, my wet clothes leaving dark patches on the plastic. My phone buzzed again. Jessica checking in. I couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I even say? The minutes stretched like taffy, elastic and endless. I stared at the motivational poster on the wall, something about hope and healing, and wanted to rip it down. Hope didn't pay medical bills. Hope didn't cure mysterious fevers. Hope was a luxury I'd lost somewhere between the divorce and this moment. A doctor appeared, young, tired-looking, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Grant, I'm Dr. Sullivan. Your son is stable for now, but we need to run some tests. His fever is concerning, and given his age and symptoms, we want to rule out some serious infections. What kind of infections? Meningitis is our primary concern. We'll need to do a lumbar puncture. The room tilted. A spinal tap? It's the only way to know for certain. But I need you to authorize the procedure, and I need complete medical history, particularly his father's. Does he have any history of immune disorders, genetic conditions, anything we should know about? Giovanni's face flashed in my mind. Strong jaw, dark eyes that missed nothing, the scar on his chin from a fight he'd never explained. I knew almost nothing about his medical history. He'd never shared that kind of vulnerability with me. Never let me past the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. I don't know, I admitted. His father and I aren't in contact. Is there any way to reach him? This could be crucial. Blood type alone might help us. And if there are any genetic factors we should be aware of, we need that information. My throat closed. For 15 months, I'd kept Luca's secret. Told myself it was for the best. Giovanni had made it clear he didn't want children. Had shut down every conversation I'd tried to have about our future. When I'd discovered I was pregnant a month after the divorce was finalized, I'd been standing in a new apartment in a new city, starting a new life. Telling him had seemed like surrendering that fresh start, like giving him power over me again. But this wasn't about me. This was about Luca. I can try to reach him, I heard myself say. Dr. Sullivan nodded, relief evident in his expression. Please do. Time matters here. A low rotor thumped outside the ER later, confirmation of what I already suspected. Giovanni hadn't driven. He'd taken a helicopter. Of course he had. We'll begin preparations for the lumbar puncture, but having his medical history could change our entire approach. He left me alone again. I pulled out my phone, staring at the blank screen like it was a weapon that could destroy everything I'd carefully built. I didn't have Giovanni's number anymore. I'd deleted it the day I moved to Boston, a symbolic gesture that had felt empowering at the time. But I knew someone who would. My old attorney had handled the divorce. She'd have his contact information in the case files. It was past 7 now. She wouldn't be in her office, but I had her cell phone number, saved for emergencies. This qualified. She answered on the 4th ring. Lauren? Is everything okay? I need Giovanni's phone number. It's an emergency. There was a pause. Lauren, I don't think that's a good idea. The divorce was contentious enough without reopening. My son is in the hospital. They need his father's medical history, please. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, give me 5 minutes. I'll text it to you. Those 5 minutes felt like drowning. I paced the small room. 7 steps one way, 7 steps back, counting them over and over to keep my mind from spiraling into all the ways this could go wrong. The text came through. A number I'd once known by heart, had seen light up my phone with promises he'd never kept, plans he'd cancel at the last minute, apologies that meant nothing because the pattern never changed. I stared at it for a full minute before my fingers started dialing. Each number felt like stepping off a cliff. No way back. Only the terrifying freefall ahead. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice, deeper than I remembered, rough with something that might have been sleep or irritation. Who is this? I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. Different versions of this conversation where I was strong, collected, in control. Every single version shattered the moment I heard him speak. Giovanni, it's Lauren. I need to tell you something. Silence stretched across the line, thick and dangerous. I could hear him breathing, controlled but alert. Giovanni had always been like that. Instantly awake, instantly aware. It was one of the things that had terrified me during our marriage. The way he could shift from sleep to fully conscious in a heartbeat, like a predator sensing threat. Lauren. My name on his lips sounded wrong after so long. Familiar and foreign all at once. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. I need your medical history, right now. Excuse me? My voice cracked despite my best efforts to stay composed. Blood type, genetic conditions, immune disorders, anything that could be relevant. I need it immediately. Why would you possibly need my medical history at... I heard rustling, probably him checking a clock. 7:30 at night after 15 months of radio silence. The double doors swung open. Dr. Sullivan appeared, his expression urgent. He pointed to his watch, mouthed the word, time. Because our son is in the hospital with a 103-degree fever, and they think it might be meningitis, and they need to know if there are any genetic factors before they do a spinal tap. The words tumbled out in one desperate breath. The silence that followed was different. Absolute, like the moment between lightning and thunder, when the entire world holds still. What did you just say? We have a son. His name is Luca. He's 7 months old. And he's sick. I need your medical information now or they can't treat him properly. 7 months. His voice had gone flat, emotionless in a way that scared me more than anger would have. You've had a child for 7 months and you never told me. Giovanni, I know you're angry, but right now I need... Where are you? Boston General Hospital, but don't move. I'll be there in 3 hours. 3 hours? That's impossible. It's a 4-hour drive and... I said 3 hours. Give the phone to the doctor. I looked at Dr. Sullivan, who'd been hovering nearby, clearly hearing every word through the hospital quiet. I handed him the phone with shaking hands. This is Dr. Sullivan. His professional mask slipped into place. Yes, sir. The patient is stable, but we're concerned about bacterial meningitis. We need comprehensive medical history, particularly, yes, blood type AB negative. Any history of, I see, and immunodeficiencies? No family history. That's helpful. Yes. We'll prepare for your arrival. He ended the call and handed my phone back, his expression unreadable. AB negative. That's rare. Less than 1% of the population. Your son inherited it from his father. Is that why you needed to know? It could affect treatment protocols and blood product availability if we need transfusions. Mr. Moretti was very thorough. He also mentioned he's bringing his own medical team. His own team? Dr. Sullivan's gaze sharpened slightly. Ms. Grant, who exactly is your ex-husband? I opened my mouth and closed it again. How did I explain Giovanni? Successful businessman was technically true, but laughably inadequate. Dangerous man involved in things I'd never fully understood. More accurate, but not something you said to a doctor in a hospital. He's well connected. He has resources. Clearly. Dr. Sullivan made a note on his tablet. In the meantime, we're moving forward with the lumbar puncture. The medical history he provided gives us better parameters to work with. You can see Luca for a few minutes before we begin the procedure. But then you'll need to wait outside. He led me through a maze of hallways to a small pediatric room where Luca lay in a hospital crib, looking impossibly tiny, surrounded by monitors and IV lines. Someone had changed him into a hospital gown decorated with cartoon animals that would have been cheerful in any other context. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but steady. The fever had left his cheeks flushed, his hair damp with sweat. I reached through the crib bars and took his small hand, his fingers instinctively curling around mine even in sleep. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have told him from the beginning. I should have been braver, but you're going to be okay. Your father is coming, and he's going to make sure you get everything you need." A nurse entered quietly, began checking the monitors. She had kind eyes, the sort that had probably seen too many scared parents in rooms like this. "He's a fighter, your little one. Strong grip, good vitals considering the fever. We'll take good care of him. Thank you. You should try to rest while you can. Once your husband arrives, it sounds like things might get complicated." "Ex-husband," I corrected automatically. She gave me a knowing look. "Honey, I've been doing this for 23 years. No man flies across state lines in 3 hours for an ex-wife's baby unless that baby is his. And no man reacts the way your doctor described his reaction unless he's about to turn this hospital upside down." She left me alone with Luca for 5 more minutes before another nurse came to take him for the procedure. I kissed his forehead, breathed in his baby smell of milk and soap, and let them wheel him away. Back in the waiting room, time turned elastic again. I tried Jessica's number. It went to voicemail. Probably asleep by now, like any reasonable person at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? The storm outside had intensified. I could hear thunder rattling the windows, see lightning flash across the dark sky. Appropriate weather for the moment, my carefully constructed life began to collapse. Giovanni was coming. Giovanni, who I'd loved desperately and left decisively. Giovanni who'd shut me out of every part of his real life while expecting me to play the perfect wife in public. Giovanni, who'd made it abundantly clear he didn't want children when I'd tried to discuss our future. I'd asked him once, 6 months into our marriage, if he ever thought about having a family. We'd been in bed, one of the rare nights he'd actually been home before midnight, and I'd felt brave enough to broach the subject. "Why would I want that?" he'd said, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. "Children are targets, liabilities. Anyone in my position knows better than to give the world that kind of leverage." I hadn't understood what he meant then. Too naive to grasp the reality of his world. I'd just heard the rejection, felt it settle into my bones like a weight I'd carry through the rest of our doomed marriage. So when I'd seen those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test a month after signing divorce papers, standing in my new Boston apartment with boxes still unpacked around me, I'd made a choice. I'd chosen to protect my child from becoming what Giovanni feared most. A target. A liability. Leverage. Now, watching the storm rage outside, I wondered if I'd protected Luca at all or just delayed the inevitable. A commotion at the emergency room entrance snapped me from my thoughts. Raised voices. The sound of someone trying to impose rules and being completely ignored. I stood up, drawn toward the noise even though I knew what I'd find. Giovanni Moretti strode through the emergency room like he owned it. And maybe he did. Maybe he owned half of Boston, and I'd just never known. He wore a black suit despite the hour, perfectly tailored, not a thread out of place. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, pushed back from his face in a way that highlighted the sharp line of his jaw, the scar on his chin that I'd once traced with my fingers in the dark. Behind him came 3 other men, also in suits, moving with the same predatory grace. One of them carried a medical bag, the private doctors he'd mentioned. His eyes found mine across the crowded emergency room. The world seemed to contract to just that moment, that look. I saw fury there, barely contained, but underneath it, something else. Fear. Raw and real and so unlike him that I almost didn't recognize it. He crossed the distance between us in seconds. I'd forgotten how tall he was, how his presence could fill a space and make everything else feel small. "Where is he?" "They're doing the lumbar puncture. We have to wait." "Show me where." "Giovanni, they won't let you back there. They have protocols." I don't care about their protocols. That's my son, and I'm not waiting in a room with outdated magazines while he's going through a medical procedure alone. He's not alone. He has nurses and doctors, and he doesn't have his parents. Giovanni's voice dropped to something dangerous. 15 months, Lauren. You kept my son from me for 15 months. You said you didn't want children. I said children were dangerous in my world. I never said I didn't want them. I said I couldn't afford to have them because people would use them to get to me. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, cedar, and something darker. And you proved me right by running away the second you found out you were pregnant. That's not fair. You never let me in. You never told me anything real about your life. How was I supposed to— Ms. Grant! Dr. Sullivan appeared, looking between Giovanni and me with obvious concern. Mr. Moretti, I presume. Giovanni's mask snapped back into place, fury replaced by cold control. Where is my son? The procedure is complete. We're running cultures now, but I can take you to see him. Both of you. We followed Dr. Sullivan through the hospital in tense silence, Giovanni's presence beside me like a storm barely contained. When we reached Luca's room, Giovanni stopped in the doorway, his entire body going still. I saw what he saw. Our son, small and vulnerable, hooked up to machines, fighting an invisible enemy. Luca had Giovanni's dark hair, his nose, the shape of his mouth. Looking at them in the same room left no doubt about paternity. Giovanni moved forward slowly, like approaching something precious and breakable. He stood beside the crib, one hand gripping the rail so tight his knuckles went white. Hello, Luca, he said softly, and his voice cracked on our son's name. I'm your father, and I'm never leaving you again. 3 weeks passed before I could bring Luca home from the hospital. 3 weeks of antibiotics and monitoring and tests that confirmed bacterial meningitis, caught early thanks to Giovanni's rapid arrival and his team of private specialists who descended on Boston General like a well-organized invasion force. Luca recovered. Giovanni didn't leave. He'd taken a suite at the Four Seasons, 5 blocks from my apartment, and appeared every single morning at 7 o'clock sharp with coffee I hadn't asked for, and a determination I couldn't fight. He wanted custody. Not shared, not visitation. Full custody, with me as the visitor in our son's life. You kept him from me for 7 months, Giovanni said on day 4 of his Boston occupation. We were in my living room, Luca asleep between us in his portable crib, oblivious to the war being waged over his future. You made that choice. Now I'm making mine. You can't just take him. I have lawyers who disagree. He pulled out a folder, laid it on my coffee table like evidence in a trial. DNA test results, medical records showing you didn't list a father, financial statements proving I can provide better care, character witnesses who'll testify about my stability. Stability? You run a criminal organization. I run several legitimate businesses. Import-export, real estate development, construction firms, all perfectly legal. His voice stayed level, controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath. What I do in my private life has never been proven in any court of law. Because you pay people off or threaten them. Because I'm careful. He leaned forward, and I caught that scent again, cedar and danger. I'm also Luca's father. He deserves to know me, to grow up in my world, protected and provided for. Your world nearly killed him. You said it yourself. Children are targets in your life, and you proved me right by keeping him secret. How long did you think that would last, Lauren? How long before someone noticed him, traced him back to you, figured out who his father was? The question hit harder than I wanted to admit. I'd been so focused on keeping Luca away from Giovanni that I hadn't considered what happened if Giovanni's enemies found out about him first. I want to be part of his life, I said, hating how my voice wavered. He's my son. Then come to New York. What? Move back. Let me provide security, medical care, everything he needs. You can see him every day. Be his mother without the financial strain that's clearly destroying you. I looked around my apartment, seeing it through his eyes. The second-hand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, the water stain on the ceiling from the leak I couldn't afford to fix properly. He wasn't wrong about the strain. Every month was a calculation of which bill to pay late, which necessity to sacrifice. I'm not taking your money, Then work for it. Giovanni sat back, and I saw the negotiation tactics I'd once watched him use in business dinners during our marriage. My companies need legal consultants. Corporate law, compliance, contracts, all legitimate work. I'll pay you what you're worth, which is considerably more than whatever firm is currently underpaying you. You want me to work for you? I want my son to have both parents in his life. I want you to stop struggling to survive. And yes, I want you close enough that I can make sure you're both safe. His jaw tightened. The world I live in doesn't care about divorce papers or good intentions. If someone wants to hurt me through Luca, they'll go through you to get to him. Separately, you're both vulnerable. Together, under my protection, you're assets I can secure. We're not assets. No, you're the mother of my child. And he's everything I didn't know I needed until I saw him lying in that hospital bed. Giovanni's voice dropped, becoming something raw that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with before the walls went up. I missed 7 months of his life, Lauren. His birth, his first smile, all of it. Don't make me miss any more. Luca stirred, making the small sounds that meant he'd wake soon, hungry and demanding. Giovanni moved before I could, lifting our son with a gentleness that still surprised me. He'd learned fast these past weeks. How to hold him, feed him, change him. He was a natural father, attentive and patient in ways he'd never been as a husband. Let me think about it, I heard myself say. You have 48 hours. Then I'm filing for emergency custody based on your inability to provide adequate care. That's not fair. Fair is a luxury neither of us can afford right now. He settled Luca against his shoulder, swaying slightly in that instinctive rhythm parents learn. I'm protecting our son. If you can't see that, you're not thinking clearly. He left with Luca still in his arms, taking him for a walk to let me rest. It was something he'd started doing, giving me breaks I desperately needed but resented accepting. Each kindness felt like another link in a chain binding me back to him. I called Jessica the moment the door closed. He wants me to move to New York. Absolutely not. Her response was immediate and fierce. Lauren, you left for a reason. Don't let one emergency erase 15 months of healing. What if he's right? What if Luca is safer with Giovanni protecting him? Safer from what? Giovanni is the danger. You know what he is? What he does. I know he loves Luca. Saying it out loud made it real. Undeniable. I see it every time he looks at him. He's not faking that. Jessica sighed. The sound of someone who'd watched her best friend make this mistake before. Love doesn't cancel out danger. It just makes the danger harder to see. But I was already seeing beyond the danger to the possibilities. Luca with the best medical care, the best schools, never worrying about rent or food, or whether I could afford new clothes when he outgrew the old ones. And yes, there was another thought I wouldn't admit to Jessica. Giovanni and I, together again, but different this time. Partners instead of strangers wearing wedding rings. I spent 2 days researching. Not just Giovanni's legitimate businesses, but everything else. The Cartel de Sinaloa he'd mentioned casually one afternoon, describing a territorial dispute that had been simmering for 2 years. The Russian organizations he'd negotiated truces with, the network of families and alliances that made up his world. That's when I found the FBI field office number, listed publicly for tips and information. I dialed it from a burner phone I'd bought with cash, keeping my voice steady as I reported unusual activity I'd witnessed near the Boston docks. Men speaking Spanish, watching shipping containers. I gave dates and times, descriptions generic enough to be useful without revealing how I knew. 3 days later, Special Agent Thomas Reed called my actual cell phone. Ms. Grant, this is Agent Reed with the FBI. I understand you've been providing information about suspected cartel activity in the Boston area. My blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. The prepaid you used pinged a tower near your block. We also ran a voice print on the tip line call. It matched a public recording of you from a bar admissions panel. You're not in trouble. We met in a coffee shop in Cambridge, far enough from my neighborhood that I felt relatively safe. Reed was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of forgettable face that probably helped in his line of work. You're in a relationship with Giovanni Moretti, he said without preamble. Ex-husband. And it's complicated. Complicated because of your son. I didn't confirm or deny. Reed pulled out a folder. flipped it open to surveillance photos of Giovanni entering my building, carrying Luca, looking every inch the devoted father. We've been building a case against the Cartel de Sinaloa for 3 years. They're expanding into New England, pushing out established operations. Moretti is one of their primary obstacles. If we can get intel on their movements through your observations, we can apply pressure from both sides. You want me to spy on my son's father. I want you to help us prevent a war that could turn Boston streets into a battlefield. Reed leaned forward. The cartel doesn't care about collateral damage. If they decide Moretti needs to go, they'll take out everyone around him, including you and your child. Why should I trust the FBI more than Giovanni? Because we're bound by laws, rules, oversight. Moretti answers to no one. Reed closed the folder. Think about it. If you decide to help, call this number. If not, watch your back. Because whether you choose to see it or not, you're already in the middle of this. He left me sitting there with a business card burning a hole in my pocket, and choices that felt more like traps closing from every side. Giovanni showed up that evening as usual, but this time he had papers. Lease agreement for an apartment in Manhattan. Upper East Side near Central Park. 3 bedrooms, security, parking. Already furnished. You can move in whenever you're ready. I haven't decided yet. Then decide now. I've enrolled Luca with a pediatric practice affiliated with Columbia Presbyterian. Best doctors in the country. His first appointment is next week. You can't just make decisions without consulting me. I'm making decisions that protect our son. You can either be part of that or fight me and lose. Giovanni set the papers on my table, then placed another envelope beside them. Contract for legal consultation services. Salary, benefits, everything we discussed. All you have to do is sign. I looked at him. Really looked. At 35, Giovanni Moretti was a man who'd built an empire through calculated risk and ruthless execution. But right now, holding our son while offering me a way forward, he looked almost vulnerable, almost like the man I'd married before everything went wrong. I need guarantees. Name them. I maintain custody, joint legal custody, with equal say in all major decisions about Luca's life. Agreed. The work I do stays legal. I won't be part of anything questionable. Agreed. And if I ever want to leave, you won't stop me. Giovanni's expression hardened. I can't promise that. Not if it means taking Luca somewhere I can't protect him. At least he was honest. More honest than he'd been during our entire marriage. Fine. Then I get to establish my own contacts, my own network. I'm not just your employee or Luca's mother. I'm still my own person. As long as those contacts don't compromise our son's safety. They won't. I signed the papers, watching my signature transform everything I'd built into something new and uncertain. In 2 weeks, I'd be back in New York, living in Giovanni's world again. But this time, I had Agent Reed's card hidden in my wallet, and a plan forming that Giovanni would never see coming. I was going to protect Luca from every angle, even the ones his father couldn't anticipate, even if it meant playing a game more dangerous than anything I'd faced before. The apartment Giovanni provided wasn't what I expected. Upper East Side, 14 floors up with views of Central Park through floor-to-ceiling windows that probably cost more than my entire year's salary in Boston. 3 bedrooms, marble countertops, furniture so pristine I was afraid Luca would destroy it within a week. But it was the men I noticed first, standing on the corner when I left for Luca's pediatric appointment, sitting in parked cars outside the building entrance, following 3 steps behind when I walked to the small playground 2 blocks away. Giovanni's security, he'd explained when I'd asked. Discreet, but constant. For our protection. Except after a month of living in New York, I'd learned to recognize Giovanni's men. They wore dark suits, but moved with a particular efficiency, communicated through earpieces, positioned themselves at strategic points. Professional, controlled. These other men were different. Rougher. They watched instead of protected. Studied instead of guarded. I mentioned it to Giovanni during one of his daily visits. He'd taken to arriving around 6 each evening, spending 2 hours with Luca, before disappearing back into whatever business occupied his nights. Tonight he was on the floor of the living room, helping Luca practice pulling himself up on the coffee table. Our son was 9 months now, determined to walk. frustrated by legs that wouldn't quite cooperate yet. There were men at the park today. Not yours. Giovanni's hand stilled on Luca's waist, though his expression remained neutral. Describe them. Hispanic, maybe. Leather jackets. One had a tattoo on his neck, some kind of symbol I didn't recognize. They stayed across the street, but they were watching us. How many? 3 that I saw. He lifted Luca, settled him on his hip, pulled out his phone with the other hand. Typed something quickly, one-handed, the way I'd seen him do 100 times during our marriage. Always working, always managing something I wasn't allowed to understand. Starting tomorrow, you don't go to that park anymore. There's a private garden on the roof of this building. Luca can play there. Giovanni, what's happening? He looked at me then, and I saw calculation behind his eyes, weighing how much to tell me, how much truth I could handle. The same look that had driven me away the first time. Remember I told you about the territorial dispute with the Cartel de Sinaloa? You said it was under control. An impasse. It was. Until I broke protocol by appearing publicly at that hospital in Boston. I should have sent representatives. Stayed hidden. Maintained the separation between my public life and private operations. His jaw tightened. But my son was dying and I didn't think. I just acted. Luca grabbed Giovanni's nose, giggling at the game he'd invented of trying to pull his father's face apart. Giovanni managed a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. The cartel maintained surveillance on me, just as I do on them. When I mobilized a medical team, chartered a helicopter, made myself visible in a way I haven't in years, they investigated. It didn't take them long to discover you. To discover Luca. Cold spread through my chest. They know about him. They know I have a son. That changes everything. He set Luca down gently in the playpen, then crossed to the window, staring out at the city below. Before, I was just another obstacle to their expansion. Now I'm a man with leverage they can exploit, a weakness they can target. So what do? We can't just stay trapped in this apartment. We don't. Tomorrow you both move to my primary residence in Westchester. 40 acres, complete security system, guards I've personally vetted. It's the safest location I have. You want me to live with you? I want my son protected. You're part of that equation whether you like it or not. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Jessica, calling for the 3rd time today. I'd been avoiding her, not sure how to explain why I'd moved back to New York, why I was living in luxury while claiming to be independent. I let it go to voicemail again. Your friend is persistent, Giovanni observed. She's worried. I told her I was taking a job opportunity in New York, but she knows something's wrong. Then tell her the truth, that the father of my child is being hunted by a Mexican cartel, and they might use my son as leverage. That'll definitely put her mind at ease. Giovanni turned from the window, and for a moment I saw past the control to something raw underneath. Fear, maybe, or fury so carefully contained it looked like ice. I never wanted this for him. For you. It's why I kept you away from my real life during our marriage. Why I shut you out instead of letting you in. Because the moment you became part of my world, truly part of it, you became a target. You're telling me this now? I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Moving to Westchester isn't just changing apartments. It's accepting that your life is permanently entangled with mine. That Luca will grow up behind walls and security cameras. That normal isn't an option anymore. I looked at our son, happily chewing on a plastic ring, oblivious to the danger circling him like sharks sensing blood in water. I thought about Agent Reed's card hidden in my wallet, about the choice I'd already made to play both sides of this war. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. I'll have everything arranged. That night, after Giovanni left, I called Jessica back. She answered on the first ring. Finally. I was about to drive to New York and hunt you down myself. I'm sorry. Things have been complicated. Complicated how? Lauren, you disappeared from Boston, moved to New York, and you're being weirdly vague about everything. What's going on? I wanted to tell her. Wanted to unload every terrifying detail onto my best friend and let her help me figure out what to do. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped by the knowledge that the more she knew, the more danger she'd be in. Giovanni and I are trying to co-parent. It's messy and strange, and I'm figuring it out as I go. Are you safe? The question hit harder than it should have. Was I safe? I was living in a gilded cage, surrounded by guards, preparing to move to a fortified estate because drug cartels wanted to hurt the father of my child. Safe seemed like a concept from another lifetime. I'm fine. Luca's fine. I promise. You're a terrible liar, Lauren Grant. Always have been. I know. But right now, this is all I can give you. She sighed. That particular sound of frustrated acceptance. Okay. But I'm here if you need me. Whatever's happening, whenever you're ready to talk, I'm here. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, watching the city lights blur through tears I hadn't realized were falling. Tomorrow I'd move into Giovanni's world completely. Tomorrow I'd become what I'd fled from 15 months ago. But tomorrow I'd also keep my son safe. And that was all that mattered. The next morning arrived too quickly. Giovanni's men loaded our belongings into black SUVs with tinted windows, while I dressed Luca in warm clothes for the November chill. He babbled happily, treating the commotion like an adventure. The drive to Westchester took 45 minutes through morning traffic. I watched the city give way to suburbs, then to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Giovanni's property appeared suddenly, the gate sliding open before our vehicle even stopped. Security so seamless it was invisible until you looked for it. The main house was massive, stone and glass and modern lines that somehow looked both imposing and elegant. Nothing like the Manhattan penthouse we'd shared during our marriage. This was a fortress disguised as a home. Giovanni was waiting on the front steps, having driven separately. He opened my door personally, lifted Luca from his car seat with practiced ease. "Welcome home," he said, and I hated how the words made something in my chest ache with a longing I thought I'd buried. Inside, the house was all clean lines and expensive minimalism, but there were touches I recognized from our marriage. The painting he'd bought at an auction in Milan. The coffee table we'd picked out together in the brief period when he'd let me help decorate our shared space. I had a room prepared for Luca on the second floor. Yours is across the hall. I assumed you'd have put me in a different wing entirely. I want him close, and you need to be close to him. His dark eyes met mine. This isn't a prison, Lauren. You have full access to everything. The security is to keep threats out, not to keep you in. But as I explored the house that afternoon while Luca napped, I saw the cameras, the reinforced doors, the panic buttons disguised as light switches. This was a beautiful prison. The walls were just made of marble instead of bars. That night, I texted Agent Reed from a burner phone I'd bought before leaving Boston. Moved to Westchester, Moretti's primary residence. Cartel confirmed surveillance. May have more information soon. His response came immediately. Be careful. You're in the center of the target now. I deleted the messages, destroyed the SIM card, and went to check on Luca. He slept peacefully in his new nursery, surrounded by monitors and guards and every protection money could buy. And I wondered if protection and prison were really that different after all. 6 weeks in Giovanni's fortress changed me in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. The nightmares started the second week. Always the same. Men with tattoos and cold eyes taking Luca from his crib while I stood frozen, unable to move or scream. I'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat, checking his nursery monitor obsessively until dawn painted the sky gray. Giovanni found me on one of those nights, curled in the hallway outside Luca's room at 3 a.m. I hadn't heard him approach, too focused on watching my son's chest rise and fall through the crack in the doorway. How long have you been sitting here? I jumped, pressing a hand to my racing heart. I don't know. An hour, maybe. He crouched beside me, still dressed despite the hour. Always working, always managing threats I couldn't see. The same dream? I'd mentioned the nightmares once, casually, pretending they didn't matter. Of course he'd remembered. Giovanni forgot nothing. They feel so real. I can see their faces. Hear Luca crying for me. Come on. He stood, offered his hand. You can't sleep in the hallway. I can't sleep anywhere. Then we'll sit somewhere more comfortable while you don't sleep. I let him pull me up, too exhausted to argue. We ended up in his study, a room I'd avoided since moving in. It smelled like him, cedar and leather, and that indefinable scent that brought back memories of better nights in our marriage. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one without asking. I took it, let the burn chase away the lingering panic from the dream. It's getting worse, I admitted. During the day, I check on him constantly. Every sound makes me think someone's breaking in. I know it's irrational. The security here it's not irrational. It's survival instinct. Giovanni settled into the chair across from me, his face half shadowed by the single lamp burning on his desk. You witnessed a real threat. Your brain is trying to protect Luca by staying hyper-alert. It's normal. Normal would be sleeping through the night. Normal died the moment you became part of my world. The bitterness in his voice surprised me. I studied him across the dim space, seeing exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes, tension in shoulders that never fully relaxed. Do you have nightmares? I asked. Every night for the last 20 years. About what? He swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. About all the things I've done, the people I've hurt, the choices that can't be undone. His eyes lifted to mine. About losing the few things that matter. The air between us felt charged, heavy with words neither of us dared speak. This was the Giovanni I'd glimpsed during our marriage, the one who existed beneath the control and calculations. Vulnerable and raw and utterly human. Why did you really shut me out? The question escaped before I could stop it. During our marriage, why didn't you let me in? Because letting you in meant making you a target. Every vulnerability I showed you was information someone could use against me. Against us. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My father taught me that lesson early. Love is weakness in my world. Family is liability. The moment you care about something, you give your enemies ammunition. But you have Luca now. You clearly care about him. And look what happened. The cartel discovered him within weeks. If I'd kept you both at arm's length, hidden, separate from my operations, they never would have known. His jaw clenched. I proved my father right by choosing emotion over strategy. You're not your father. No, I'm worse. Because I knew better and I still couldn't stay away. Luca's cry through the baby monitor shattered the moment. I stood quickly, grateful for the interruption, for an excuse to escape the intensity of Giovanni's gaze. I'll get him. Let me. Giovanni was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I followed, watching him lift our son with a gentleness that still caught me off guard. Luca had started pulling himself up on furniture, determined little fists gripping anything stable while his legs wobbled beneath him. Hey, little man. Bad dream? Giovanni swayed slightly, that unconscious rhythm parents learn. Luca settled immediately, stuffing his thumb in his mouth. Your mother has those too. Must be genetic. Trauma, not genetics. In our family, they're the same thing. I wanted to argue but couldn't. Giovanni's world was violence disguised as business, power maintained through fear. And now Luca was part of it, whether I wanted him to be or not. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into work. The legal consultation Giovanni had offered turned out to be legitimate, complex corporate contracts for his import businesses. I worked from a home office he'd set up, researching compliance issues and reviewing documents while Luca played nearby. But I also continued feeding information to Agent Reed, conversations I overheard, patterns I noticed in Giovanni's schedule, mentions of territories and shipments. Nothing concrete. Nothing that would directly incriminate Giovanni, but enough to help the FBI build their case against the cartel. The guilt ate at me every time Giovanni showed me kindness, every time he was patient with Luca, every time I caught him watching us with something that looked dangerously close to contentment. One afternoon, Giovanni found me in the library. Luca had just taken 3 full steps before plopping down on his diaper-padded bottom. So proud of himself, he'd clapped his own achievement. He's walking early. 9 months is ahead of schedule. Determined, like his father. Giovanni picked Luca up, tossed him gently in the air until our son shrieked with laughter. The sound filled the huge house, made it feel less like a fortress and more like a home. I've been thinking, Giovanni said, still playing with Luca, about what you said before we moved here. About wanting guarantees. I remember, I can't promise safety. I can't promise normal, but I can promise honesty. He set Luca down, let him practice his wobbly walking between furniture pieces. No more secrets between us. You ask me something, I'll tell you the truth. Any question? Any question. I tested him. How many people have you killed? Directly? 3. Indirectly? Through orders I've given? I stopped counting after 20. The casual admission should have horrified me. Instead, I felt something like relief. He was being honest, finally, after years of walls and deflection. Do you regret it? Some of them. Not all. The world I operate in doesn't allow for much regret. What about us? Do you regret our marriage? His eyes found mine, held them. I regret how I handled it. I regret shutting you out when I should have trusted you with the truth. But marrying you, he shook his head slowly. That's the only thing I've done right in the last 10 years. My breath caught. Luca chose that moment to lose his balance, falling forward. Giovanni caught him smoothly, lifting him onto his hip. Bedtime for you, troublemaker. I followed them upstairs, watched Giovanni handle bath and pajamas and bedtime stories with practiced ease. He'd learned fast, adapting to fatherhood like he adapted to everything else, with focus and determination. After Luca fell asleep, I retreated to my room, called Jessica on the encrypted phone Giovanni had given me for personal use, not knowing he probably monitored all calls anyway. How's the gilded cage? Jessica asked instead of hello. Complicated. That's been your answer for 6 weeks. I need more than complicated. So I told her. Everything. The cartel, the threats, Giovanni's world, the violence simmering beneath the surface of his legitimate businesses. I told her about Agent Reed, about the information I was gathering, about the impossible position I'd put myself in. Lauren, this is insane. You need to get out. I can't. Luca is safer here than anywhere else. Is he? Or are you just telling yourself that because you're falling for Giovanni again? The accusation landed hard because it was true. I was falling, had been falling since that first night in the hospital, when he'd looked at our son with such fierce devotion. He's different than he was during our marriage. Or maybe he's just showing you the parts he kept hidden before. That doesn't mean the dangerous parts went away. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from here it looks like you're playing both sides. And eventually, someone's going to figure that out. When they do, being caught between the FBI and a Mafia boss isn't going to end well. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, Jessica's words echoing. She was right. I was playing a game I couldn't win, gathering information for the FBI while living under Giovanni's protection, caring for him while betraying him. A knock on my door pulled me from spiraling thoughts. Come in. Giovanni entered, stopped when he saw me sitting in darkness. Are you okay? Define okay. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of my bed, close enough to touch but leaving distance between us. Talk to me. About what? About how I'm terrified every second that something will happen to Luca? About how I don't know if I'm protecting him or endangering him by being here? About how every time you're kind to me, I remember why I loved you and hate myself for being weak? The words tumbled out unchecked, raw and honest and revealing everything I'd been trying to hide. Giovanni's hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers warm and solid. You're not weak. You're the strongest person I know. You left me when staying would have been easier. You raised our son alone when asking for help would have been simpler. You're surviving in a world that's trying to break you, and you're doing it with grace. I turned to look at him, found his face inches from mine. His free hand came up, traced the line of my jaw with his thumb. I never stopped loving you, Lauren. Even when I was pushing you away, even when I was being the worst version of myself. I never stopped. Giovanni, he kissed me then, soft and tentative, asking rather than demanding. And I kissed him back, falling into the familiar taste of him, the solid warmth of his body against mine. It felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff simultaneously. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. We can't do this. It's too complicated. It was always complicated. That's never stopped us before. Luca's cry through the monitor pulled us apart. Giovanni stood, and I saw him force control back into place, the vulnerability locked away again behind his usual mask. I'll check on him. After he left, I touched my lips, still feeling the pressure of his kiss, and wondered how much longer I could keep playing both sides before everything collapsed. The drones appeared 3 days after Giovanni kissed me. Small, dark shapes against the November sky, circling the property perimeter like mechanical vultures. I spotted the first one from Luca's nursery window while changing his diaper. Watched it hover near the eastern tree line before disappearing. Giovanni's security team moved immediately. Within an hour, the property went into lockdown. Additional guards materialized from somewhere, positioning themselves at strategic points I hadn't even known existed. The house transformed from fortress to bunker in the time it took me to feed Luca lunch. "They're testing our response times," Giovanni explained that evening. We stood in his security office, a room I'd only glimpsed before, watching feeds from 47 cameras positioned throughout the estate, mapping weak points, calculating how many men we have, where they're stationed. The cartel? Who else? He zoomed in on footage from the north gate, enhanced the image until I could see tire tracks in the mud. They've been quiet for weeks. I should have known that meant they were planning something. Luca sat in a portable playpen we'd brought down, stacking blocks with intense concentration. Almost 10 months old now, he'd mastered walking and was working on running, much to everyone's anxiety. He had no concept of the danger surrounding him, no understanding that men with guns watched his every outdoor appearance through scopes and surveillance equipment. What happens now? Now I meet with them. Face to face, neutral territory. Try to negotiate before this escalates into open war. Giovanni's jaw clenched. The muscle jumping in a way I'd learned meant he was calculating odds, running scenarios. The meeting is set for next week. That's insane. You just said they're mapping the property? This could be a trap. It's definitely a trap. The question is whether I can turn it to my advantage. Over the next week, I watched Giovanni prepare with the same meticulous attention he'd once applied to legitimate business deals. He met with his most trusted people, men whose names I was learning, whose faces had become familiar. They spoke in Italian sometimes. Rapid exchanges I couldn't follow but understood were about strategy and contingencies, and who to trust if everything went wrong. I threw myself into helping the only way I could. Giovanni's import businesses were legitimate fronts, but they still required legal compliance. Contracts that would hold up under federal scrutiny. I reviewed every document, flagged potential vulnerabilities, suggested language that would protect his interests without crossing into obviously illegal territory. "You're good at this," Giovanni said one night. We were in his study, surrounded by papers, Luca asleep in his portable crib near the fireplace. Better than the lawyers I've been paying premium rates for years. Because I actually care about keeping you out of prison. "Do you?" He looked up from the contract he'd been reading, his dark eyes catching the lamplight. "Care about keeping me out of prison?" The question felt loaded with more than he was asking. I met his gaze, refused to look away even though my heart hammered against my ribs. "I care about Luca having his father. The rest is complicated. Everything with us has always been complicated." He wasn't wrong. Since that kiss, we'd been dancing around each other, carefully maintaining distance while the air between us stayed charged with tension. I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd find excuses to brush past me in hallways, his hand landing on my lower back in that possessive way that made my breath catch. But we hadn't crossed that line again. Not with so much uncertainty. Not with the cartel circling and Agent Reed waiting for information I still hadn't figured out how to provide without destroying everything. Speaking of which, Reed had been persistent. 3 encrypted messages in the past week alone, each more urgent than the last. The FBI knew about the upcoming meeting. They wanted details, location, timing, anything that would let them set up their own surveillance. I'd been stalling, claiming I didn't have access to that information. It was partly true. Giovanni kept the specifics close, sharing only what I needed to know. But I could have asked. Could have used the trust he was rebuilding with me to extract what Reed wanted. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. "I've been thinking," Giovanni said, pulling me from my spiral of guilt, "about what happens if the meeting goes badly. Don't. Lauren, we have to be realistic. These men want me dead or weakened. They want access to my territory, my operations. The only thing stopping them from making a move is uncertainty about how my organization would respond to my death. So don't give them the chance. I have to end this. I can't raise Luca in a war zone. Can't have you both living behind walls and cameras forever." He stood, crossed to where I sat, crouched down so we were eye level. But if something happens to me, I need to know you and Luca will be protected. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not. Probably not. But I didn't survive this long by failing to plan for worst-case scenarios. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, handed it to me. Legal documents. Full custody to you. Trust fund for Luca. Access to accounts that will keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. Instructions for my second-in-command about your protection. My hands shook as I opened the folder, saw my name on page after page of legal text. He'd thought of everything, anticipated every possibility except the one where I couldn't imagine him gone. Giovanni, you don't have to do this now. Yes, I do. Tomorrow I meet with the cartel's leadership. Tomorrow I walk into a situation where I'm outnumbered and relying on honor among thieves to keep me breathing. Tonight, I make sure my son is protected no matter what. Luca stirred in his crib, making the small sounds that meant he'd wake soon. Giovanni went to him automatically, lifted him with the gentle competence that still caught me off guard. Our son blinked sleepily, then smiled at his father with such pure joy it cracked something open in my chest. Hey, troublemaker, did we wake you? Giovanni swayed slightly, that unconscious rhythm. Your mama and I are just talking about boring grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. But I was worried. Terrified, actually. The thought of Luca growing up without his father, of Giovanni walking into danger tomorrow and not walking back out, made it hard to breathe. Stay, I heard myself say. Tonight, stay with us. Giovanni's eyes found mine over Luca's head. Lauren, I don't want to be alone tonight. I don't want you to be alone. Whatever happens tomorrow, tonight we should be together. He nodded slowly, something raw and vulnerable crossing his face before he controlled it. Okay. We took Luca upstairs together, went through the familiar bedtime routine that had become our shared ritual. Bath, pajamas, story time. Luca fought sleep like he always did, determined not to miss anything, until finally his eyes drifted closed and his breathing evened out. Giovanni stood over the crib for a long time after, just watching our son sleep. I stood beside him, our shoulders touching, both of us silent with thoughts too heavy to speak aloud. I never thought I'd have this, Giovanni finally said. A family. Someone to come home to. Someone who made all the violence and danger feel worth surviving. You have it now. Do I? He turned to face me fully, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. Because some days I think you're only here for Luca. That you're tolerating me because you have to, not because you want to. That's not true. Then what is true, Lauren? What are we doing here? The question hung between us, demanding an answer I'd been avoiding for weeks. But tonight, with danger looming and uncertainty pressing in from all sides, I couldn't hide behind fear anymore. I'm falling in love with you again, I admitted. Maybe I never stopped, and it terrifies me because I know what your world costs. I know the price of loving someone like you, and yet you're still here, because the price of not loving you is higher. Giovanni kissed me then, deep and claiming and full of everything we'd been holding back. I melted into him, let him back me against the nursery wall, his body pressing into mine with an urgency that matched my own. Not here, I gasped against his mouth. Luca, my room. We barely made it down the hall, stopping twice to kiss against walls, hands already working at buttons and zippers. Inside his room, with the door closed and locked, we came together with the desperate intensity of people who knew how fragile this moment was, how easily it could be stolen. Afterward, tangled in his sheets with his heartbeat steady under my ear, I felt the weight of everything I hadn't told him, about Agent Reed, about the information I'd been gathering, about the choice I'd made weeks ago to play both sides. I need to tell you something, I started. Tomorrow. Giovanni's arms tightened around me. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Tonight, just let me have this. Let me have you, without complications or confessions or anything except this. So I stayed quiet, let him hold me through the night, and prayed that tomorrow wouldn't destroy everything we'd just begun to rebuild. Giovanni left before dawn. I woke to an empty bed, his side still warm, and found a note on the nightstand written in his precise handwriting. Taking care of business. Be home for dinner. I promise. The promise felt fragile, like glass I was terrified to touch. I spent the morning trying to maintain normalcy for Luca's sake. Breakfast, playtime, morning nap. But my hands shook when I lifted him. My attention fractured between his babbling and the clock ticking toward whatever was happening in that warehouse across the river. Giovanni had told me the location last night, whispering it against my hair in the dark. An abandoned industrial complex in Newark. Neutral ground where neither side held advantage. Or so they claimed. He'd kissed me one more time before leaving, lingering at the doorway like he was memorizing my face. By noon, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I pulled out the encrypted phone, texted Agent Reed with trembling fingers. Meeting happening now. Newark Industrial District, warehouse complex off Route 1. Cartel and Moretti. This is it. His response came immediately. FBI already positioned. We've had surveillance on that location for weeks. Stay put wasn't a suggestion. It was procedure, the kind that keeps civilians breathing. Whatever happens, stay where you are. Let us handle this. But I couldn't just sit there while Giovanni walked into an ambush. Because that's what this was. I could feel it in my bones. The cartel had been too quiet, too accommodating about meeting terms. They wanted him vulnerable, wanted him away from his fortress where they could strike. The call came at 1:15. Not Giovanni. One of his men, voice tight with controlled panic. Mrs. Moretti, there's been an incident. The boss is hurt. We're bringing him back now. You need to prepare. My vision tunneled. How bad? Gunshot wound, shoulder. He's conscious, stable, but he needs medical attention we can't provide in transit. We'll be there in 20 minutes. I moved on autopilot after that. Called the private doctor Giovanni kept on retainer, told him to get to Westchester immediately. Cleared the dining room table, laid out clean towels and medical supplies I'd learned to keep stocked. Asked one of the security guards to take Luca to the nursery, away from whatever was about to walk through that door. Then I called Agent Reed back. Giovanni's hurt. The meeting was an ambush. Your people need to move now before the cartel disappears. We're already moving. Multiple arrests in progress. Lauren, you did the right thing. This information, I don't care about that right now. Just make sure they can't hurt him again. I hung up, stood at the window watching the driveway. Every second felt like an hour until finally, black SUVs appeared, moving fast but controlled. They pulled up to the entrance and men poured out, surrounding a figure being half carried between two others. Giovanni, blood soaking through his shirt, face pale but set in determined lines. When he saw me standing in the doorway, something in his expression cracked. I kept my promise, he said, voice rough. I came home. The next 4 weeks blurred into a haze of recovery and revelation. The doctor removed the bullet, stitched Giovanni back together with the clinical efficiency of someone who'd done this before. No hospitals, no official reports, just another injury in a life built on violence. Agent Reed called 3 days later with updates. The FBI had arrested 7 members of the cartel's leadership during simultaneous raids across 3 states. The timing had been perfect, Reed explained, because Giovanni's meeting had drawn key players into one location while his information about their operations had provided targets for the other raids. Your cooperation was invaluable, Reed said. We couldn't have built this case without you. I didn't do it for you. I did it to protect my family. I know, but the result is the same. The Cartel de Sinaloa's East Coast operations are crippled. They'll be fighting internal power struggles for years. They won't have time or resources to come after Moretti. After I hung up, I sat in Giovanni's study, processing what I'd done. I'd betrayed him, fed information to the FBI for months, used his trust against him. And somehow, accidentally, I'd saved his life by doing it. Giovanni found me there an hour later, moving carefully, one arm in a sling. He'd been pushing recovery, refusing to stay in bed despite doctor's orders. You're supposed to be resting. I've been resting for 3 days. I'm going insane. He lowered himself into the chair across from me, wincing at the movement. We need to talk. My heart dropped. About what? About how the FBI knew exactly when and where to strike. About how their timing was too perfect to be coincidence. His dark eyes held mine, unreadable. About Agent Thomas Reed. The floor seemed to tilt. Giovanni, I've known for 2 weeks. One of my people spotted you with him in Cambridge. I had him investigated, discovered he's FBI Organized Crime Division. Figured out what you were doing pretty quickly after that. Horror washed through me. Why didn't you say anything? Because I needed to understand your reasoning first. Needed to see if you were trying to destroy me or protect Luca. He leaned forward slowly. You were gathering information on the cartel, not on me. Every piece of intelligence you passed to Reed was about their operations, their movements. You never gave him anything that would hurt my legitimate businesses. I was trying to help. The cartel was hunting us, and the FBI had resources you didn't. You thought you could protect our son by playing both sides. Giovanni's expression softened. You were right. The arrests Reed made yesterday removed every major player who wanted me dead. The organization is in chaos. It'll be years before they're a threat again, if ever. You're not angry? I'm furious. You lied to me, betrayed my trust, put yourself in danger by working with federal law enforcement. He paused. But I also understand why you did it. You saw an option I couldn't see because my pride wouldn't let me cooperate with the FBI. You made an impossible choice to keep Luca safe. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. I should have told you. Should have trusted you with the truth instead of sneaking around behind your back. Yes, you should have. Giovanni rose too, crossed to where I stood. But I should have let you in during our marriage. Should have trusted you with the truth about my world instead of shutting you out. We've both made mistakes. His good arm came around me, pulling me against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, alive when he could have been dead. The doctor says you'll make a full recovery. I whispered against his shirt. I always do. I'm too stubborn to die. Don't joke about that. I'm not joking. I'm promising. He tilted my chin up, forced me to meet his eyes. I can't promise a life without danger. Can't promise the world I operate in will ever be completely safe. But I can promise I'll always fight to come home to you and Luca. That I'll use every resource, every advantage, every ruthless tactic I know to survive. Because losing you again isn't an option. I was an idiot to leave you the first time. You were brave. You had standards, boundaries I wasn't willing to respect. But we're different now. I'm different. You've seen the worst of what I am, and you're still here. I'm still here because I love you. Because watching you walk out that door knowing you might not come back was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Because I'd rather live in danger with you than in safety without you. He kissed me then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, I saw something in his expression I'd never seen during our marriage. Not just love or desire, but partnership. Respect. Trust earned through fire and blood and impossible choices. Reed wants me to testify if any of the cartel cases go to trial, I said eventually. Will you? Only if you're okay with it. Only if it won't put us in more danger. Giovanni considered, his strategic mind already calculating angles. Testify. Help them build airtight cases. The more cartel leadership we keep locked up, the safer Luca is. I'll provide additional security during any trial proceedings. You're really okay with me cooperating with the FBI? I'm okay with you doing whatever keeps our family safe. Even if it means working with people I'd normally consider enemies. He smiled slightly. Besides, having contacts in federal law enforcement might prove useful in the future, as long as they understand the boundaries. Over the following weeks, Giovanni healed, and our life found new equilibrium. The cartel's leadership remained in federal custody, charged with racketeering, drug trafficking, and attempted murder. The organization splintered into factions fighting for control, too busy with internal wars to threaten us. Giovanni's legitimate businesses thrived without the constant pressure of territorial disputes. I continued my legal work, now officially consulting for both his companies, and occasionally for the FBI when cases overlapped with organized crime. We weren't normal. Would never be normal, but we were together, and we were safe, and that was more than I'd ever dared hope for. One evening, I found Giovanni in Luca's nursery, watching our son sleep. Almost 11 months old now, Luca was walking everywhere, getting into everything, fearless and determined like his father. What are you thinking about? I asked quietly, about how this almost didn't happen. How I almost lost both of you because I was too proud to let you in. Giovanni's hand found mine. About how lucky I am that you gave me a second chance. We gave each other a second chance. He pulled me close, and we stood there together watching our son dream. Two people who'd survived impossible odds to build something worth fighting for. 3 months after Giovanni's recovery, I stood in the legal department of Moretti Import-Export, reviewing compliance documents for a shipment from Milan. The office was mine, positioned on the 3rd floor of his Manhattan headquarters with views of the Hudson River. Real work. Legitimate work. Building something that wouldn't crumble under federal scrutiny. Mrs. Moretti, there's a call for you on line 3. I still hadn't gotten used to being called that again. We'd remarried 6 weeks ago. A small ceremony at the Westchester estate with Jessica as my only attendant, and 5 of Giovanni's most trusted people as witnesses. No elaborate gown, or hundreds of guests this time. Just vows spoken with complete honesty, promises we both intended to keep. Jessica had flown in from Boston, meeting Giovanni properly for the first time. I'd watched her study him over dinner, searching for the monster she'd imagined from my stories. What she found instead was a man who discussed Luca's developmental milestones with genuine enthusiasm, who asked about her life with real interest, who treated me like an equal partner rather than a possession. He's not what I expected, she'd told me later, helping me prepare for the ceremony. He's still dangerous, still part of a world I don't understand. But the way he looks at you, Lauren, that's real. I know. Are you sure about this? Really sure? I'd taken her hands, held them tight. I've never been more certain of anything. Now, I picked up the phone, already smiling because I knew who it was before the caller spoke. I'm stealing you for lunch, Giovanni said without preamble. Luca wants to show you something. He's 14 months old. What could he possibly need to show me? Come home and find out. Home. The word still felt new and precious, weighted with meaning it hadn't held during our first marriage. Home wasn't just the estate in Westchester anymore. It was wherever Giovanni and Luca were. The family we'd built from ashes and second chances. I found them in the garden, despite the February cold. Luca bundled in a puffy jacket that made him look like a tiny astronaut. Giovanni crouched beside him with a child-sized soccer ball. Our son kicked it with enthusiastic inaccuracy, then shrieked with laughter when it rolled away. Again, Luca demanded, his vocabulary expanding daily. Giovanni retrieved the ball, positioned it carefully. Like this, remember? Kick with the inside of your foot. Luca kicked with his toe instead, sending the ball wobbling across the grass. He chased after it on sturdy legs, fearless and determined. So much like his father, it made my chest ache. He's going to be trouble, I said, joining Giovanni. He already is. Giovanni straightened, pulled me against his side. His shoulder had healed completely, no lingering weakness from the bullet wound. Just another scar added to the collection he carried like a roadmap of survival. But he's ours. Mama. Luca abandoned the ball, ran to me with arms outstretched. I caught him, lifted him despite the growing heaviness in my belly. 4 months pregnant now, moving more carefully, but not willing to miss moments like these. You're getting so big, I told him, kissing his cold cheeks. Soon you'll have a baby brother or sister to teach soccer. Baby, Luca agreed, patting my stomach with surprising gentleness. He'd been fascinated by the pregnancy, pressing his ear against my belly to listen, talking to his unborn sibling in his own language. This pregnancy was different from the first in every way that mattered. Planned, celebrated, shared. Giovanni had been at every doctor's appointment, his hand in mine during ultrasounds, his voice steady when I'd panicked about complications or worried I couldn't love another child as much as I loved Luca. You have an infinite capacity for love, he'd told me. That's your superpower. That's what makes you strong enough to survive my world. Agent Reed had closed his investigation 2 months ago, satisfied with the convictions they'd secured. The cartel's East Coast operations remained in shambles, leadership imprisoned or dead, the organization too fractured to pose immediate threat. Reed had offered me permanent consultant status with the FBI, which I'd declined. I was done playing both sides, done with the weight of secrets. Giovanni and I had built something better, partnership based on honesty, however brutal that honesty sometimes was. He told me about his businesses, the legitimate and the questionable, trusting me to understand the difference and help maintain the boundaries. I told him my fears, my doubts, my moments of wondering if I'd made the right choice. "I never wanted this life for you," Giovanni had said during one of those vulnerable late-night conversations. "I wanted to give you safety, normalcy, everything you deserved. I wanted partnership. I wanted to be seen as your equal, not something precious to protect. You're giving me that now. That's everything." Luca squirmed to be put down, returned to his soccer practice with single-minded determination. Giovanni and I stood together watching him, my back against his chest, his arms around me, and the child growing inside me. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, letting me back in, taking the risk of having a family, every single day. I turned in his arms, ready to argue, and saw the smile tugging at his mouth. "I regret every moment I wasted keeping you at arm's length during our first marriage. Every choice I made out of fear instead of love. Every day I could have had with Luca that I missed." His hand came up, traced the line of my jaw. "But regret what we have now? Never. Not for a second." The baby kicked, hard enough that Giovanni felt it through my shirt. His expression transformed into wonder, the same look he'd worn at every ultrasound, every milestone. This was a man who'd thought family meant weakness, vulnerability to exploit. Now he understood it meant strength, purpose, something worth fighting for. "Come on," I said, taking his hand. "Let's go inside before we all freeze. I'll make hot chocolate and you can read Luca his afternoon story. The one about the brave knight? He likes that one because the knight reminds him of you. The knight always wins in those stories. Real life isn't that simple." "No," I agreed, watching Luca chase his ball one more time before scooping him up. "But we're still here. We're still together. That's winning enough for me." Inside, the house that had once felt like a fortress now felt like home. Luca fell asleep during the story, exhausted from his soccer practice, his small hand curled around Giovanni's finger. We sat there long after he drifted off, neither of us willing to break the moment. Jessica called that evening, checking in like she did every week since the wedding. "How's Married Life version 2.0? "Better than the original," I admitted. "Different. Real. And you're happy?" "Genuinely happy, not just surviving." I looked across the room where Giovanni was assembling a crib for the nursery, refusing help despite my offers, determined to build something with his own hands for his second child. "I'm happy," I said, and meant it completely. After we hung up, Giovanni abandoned the crib to join me on the couch, pulling me against him with the casual possessiveness I'd learned to treasure instead of resent. "I love you," he said quietly. "I don't say it enough. But I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. I know. I love you too." Outside, snow began to fall, coating the grounds in white, muffling the world beyond our walls. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats Giovanni would have to navigate, new choices we'd face together. But tonight, we had this: family, truth, love built on foundation of scars and survival, and stubborn refusal to give up on each other. My phone buzzed with a text from the legal department about a contract needing review. Giovanni's buzzed with something he'd handle in the morning. Luca stirred in his crib upstairs, settling back to sleep without waking. The baby kicked again, reminding me of the future growing inside me. This was our life now. Complicated, dangerous, imperfect, but ours. And I wouldn't trade it for any version of safety that meant losing him.